The Philippines, a country of over 7,000 islands, and almost every one packed with some of the friendliest folks you could meet. The obvious plan is to go to the fringes and explore, but right away the country pulls me in. I'm instantly submerged in the back streets of the big city, where the exotic, the erotic, and the sublime all merge. When I pull myself free, I drop into something equally consuming. Where the city has deep wells of humanity, the country holds civilizations that date back to the gods, and a landscape that's been created by the toil of 100 generations. I'll go there to place my feet in their soil, to embrace the ancient and occasionally disquieting practices of a culture isolated in the folds of densely forested mountains. What secrets might they cover? I'm Jonathan Legg. I'm an explorer, a globetrotter on a continual quest for the unusual, exotic, and adventurous side of life. My destination is the core, the very beating heart of a place. It's the search for the wildest, most unpredictable experiences. Moments that widen and deepen our perspective of the world we live in. What happens on our journey, I don't know. But one thing I do know is this: we're sticking to the road less traveled. Manila, the capital of the Philippines, has been through a lot. Controlled at various times by the Islamists, British, Spanish, the Americans, and the Japanese, it must have been hard to keep things straight. Later, the city was almost totally leveled during the fierce World War II battles, as the US and Japanese forces struggled for control of the islands. Now it's not only built back up, it has experienced hypergrowth, becoming one of Asia's most densely populated cities. But is it overbaked? A place you just pass through on your arrival and your departure from the country. Maybe I could find some road less traveled material if I embarked on a long walk through its various neighborhoods. So I laced up and I hit the pavement. I start my walkabout right outside the hotel. The area is Makati, where a high concentration of foreigners flock. Many foreigners with specific needs. And as I pass down the streets, it's not too hard to guess what those may be.
Better than gold massage?
Yeah, gold massage.
One thing that is not in short supply on this street are massages, from what I've gathered, from my limited intel. Kind of looks like that sort of neighborhood.
You can't go more than a few steps in this neighborhood without getting accosted. If it ain't a massage, it's a gold watch, a box of Viagra, or simply a handout.
Every city has its vibe, every neighborhood has its vibe. Works for some people, doesn't work for others. I'm kind of really non-judgmental with that. As long as everybody's doing their thing and not harming anybody, then I say live and let live.
Although it's quite the spectacle, it's really not my scene. So I head back to the hotel and plan to shift gears in the morning. There is a spot which should prove drastically different.
What a contrast, huh? Walking along this serene stretch of old fortress wall in the colonial capital of Spanish Philippines, Intramuros.
From inside these heavily fortified walls, the Spanish ran the Philippines and their East Indies Empire for over 3 centuries. Until American warships sank 2 of their armadas in Cuba and Manila Bay, essentially crumbling the aging empire and marking Spain's curtain call in the Philippine Islands. Remember the Main? Intramuros makes for a pleasant place for a stroll. Spacious, breezy, quaint. Not adjectives commonly associated with Manila. But it's not sterile like a museum. It doesn't take much exploring to see the Filipinos and their energy taking over what was probably once a fairly officious and orderly neighborhood. This may have once been Spain, but it's definitely Southeast Asia now. And as I walk out of Intramuros, I think that's just fine with me. The Philippines isn't really known for having the best cuisine. You could almost say it's the England of Asia when it comes to dining.
And they really don't have any archaeological wonders like the Taj Mahal or Angkor Wat. But what they lack in these categories, they make up for with warm, friendly people. What's up, guys? 2 more? Okay.
So I'll continue my tour with this in mind. Focus on the people. And I have an idea where I can find a bunch of them. Tondo is what you might call a slum. As soon as I drop into the neighborhood, I feel a drastic change in energy. The density of humanity surrounding me on every side and in every angle. If I'm not welcome here, I'm in big trouble. As I walked over the bridge to get here, they literally closed a gate behind me. The camera crew is on the other side. Did I just walk into a giant trap? Wallet in my pocket, money belt around my waist? The people quickly surround me. Where am I from? Why am I here? But the smiles on their faces are sincere. My anxiety dissipates. I've been around enough to feel danger, and I don't feel it here.
You know, a lot of Filipinos told me, look out for this neighborhood, but I got hustled a lot more in Makati, and the vibe here is great. Might be poor, but they've got a vibrant neighborhood.
A local lady takes it upon herself to show me around. She's evidently proud of her neighborhood, and I'm appreciative of the welcome.
All this is you?
Yeah, my father.
Your father has all this. Do you rent anything, or it's just for the family?
In this compound.
Family compound. You got the Virgin Mary,
Yeah.
and then Colt 45 with a skull. Yeah, it's like a contrast. It's a nice contrast.
Little kids peep out of windows with bright smiles, old folks look up from their work, and occasionally a baby seems to be committing suicide.
Be careful with the gun.
This is probably the most dangerous thing I saw in Tondo.
What's impressive is how industrious the people here seem to be. Every available space is utilized. Things are recycled. The lady over here is cooking a big vat of beef stew, and the lard that's left over is being used for candles. I mean, things your average person wouldn't consider. I suppose out of necessity, they become rather inventive. And wow, it may look a little chaotic, but it's vibrant. It's full of good energy.
This feels like the kind of neighborhood where a traveler could lose themselves for a while. Rent a small flat and just become part of the community. Maybe to find the soul of the Filipinos, maybe to find themselves. Something like Gregory David Roberts' alleged experience in Shantaram's Dharavi. Dharavi, as you may have seen in a previous episode, is quickly progressing. Tondo feels like she's still waiting to find her calling. But until then, she has her community. For now, I must ramble on. While Manila's disenfranchised neighborhoods may not be creating a lot of opportunity, there are some venues by which people have found their way out and up the economic ladder. The most famous example is at my next destination. I'm Jonathan Legg, and I'm right on the verge of a huge rip through a country of islands and big smiles, the Philippines. I've decided to begin my adventure right off the plane, taking a walking tour of the country's underrated capital city, Manila. I've walked through the Sin City atmosphere of Makati's Burgos Avenue, strolled through the scenic and airy streets of the old Spanish colonial seat, and dove into the thick stew of humanity in Tondo, where a lack of money is compensated with gumption and joie de vivre. But opportunity does come knocking occasionally, even in the city's most challenging streets. To trace the roots of a perfect rags to riches tale, I cruise over to Sampaloc. It's that classic story. Kid from the mean streets gets into a lot of scraps, someone gets him to the gym to channel all that energy, and the next thing you know, you've got a world champ. Mexico has Julio Cesar Chavez. America has Foreman and Tyson. But the Philippines holds a lock on this line. Pancho Villa, Flash Elorde, Serafino Garcia, and the most popular of all?
Manny Pacquiao!
You probably know Pacquiao as the only boxer to hold belts in 8 divisions, one of the highest paid, most recognizable athletes in the world. But when he moved to Manila at age 14, he was homeless and broke. That all began to change in this neighborhood, where he found a small boxing gym and began his rise to the top. Now the question is, can I find it? The neighborhood has a disheveled layout, and although I feel like I'm close, few people seem to know where their very own world-famous boxer used to train, in a building that he now owns, in their backyard. Manny may fight at the MGM Grand, but his gym is pure RLT material, off the beaten path.
Sort of the mean streets, if you will. Hello, hello. How are you?
We're fine.
But not that mean, obviously. Check out this building. Notice how it's different from all the concrete and metal structures around it? It's because it's a Japanese garrison from World War II, still standing. It's impressive.
In the end, leave it to the kids to know where their hometown hero cut his teeth. They gleefully lead the charge, taking me down a small alley where, sure enough, I find the gym. Kinda what you'd expect. No frills, a little gritty, and reeking of testosterone-laced sweat.
How's it going? I'm Johnny.
Robert Barol.
Robert Verone. Nice to meet you. Yeah, so you trained Manny Pacquiao when he was a young kid and he came up from the street. You helped him with his start. Can you teach me a trick or two? Okay. You tell me after if I have potential, if I can be a star. The next Pacquiao. Maybe. All right. I'm ready for this. I got my yellow shorts, lucky Italian yellow shorts under my jeans. I don't know about you, but I think these shorts say winner. Pow!
You are boxing. Oh.
I don't need the shirt. Same.
I'm taped up and ready to go. At this point, I feel pretty comfortable sliding on a pair of gloves. Although the walking's been great, I still haven't had a solid workout after that long plane ride over to Manila, and I'm looking forward to a good sweat. Verone doesn't disappoint, putting me through a series of combinations, encouraging me to hit harder and move faster. Eventually, some defense gets thrown into the combos. Strike and get out of the way. Strike, evade, and strike again. Man, it feels good smacking those mitts.
I don't want to sound like a sissy, but my hands actually kind of hurt after that, despite the pad and everything.
This is perhaps the biggest revelation of this boxing training. Just how key footwork is. I find mine is slow and sloppy, lumbering. Now look at how the pros move their feet. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but My hands are accustomed to keyboards and beer bottles, and they're starting to feel a little raw. Maybe it was a foolish wish, but with a little cajoling, I convinced Verone to get in the ring with me. Before I call it quits, I want to slug it out a bit. But here's that footwork issue again. Verone has had a lot of fights under his belt, but either he's terribly overestimating me or he's being extremely gracious. I mean, I don't want him to knock me silly, but he could put a little leather on me. Instead, he puts on a defensive clinic. I chase him around, but I feel like Rocky trying to catch that chicken. The guy is slippery like an eel. Eventually, he does unleash a nice one to my face. I knew he was holding out, and I'm probably lucky for it. After a few more shenanigans, we call it quits. I'm not gonna catch him, and if he counterpunched, he'd probably lay me out. I'm leaving myself open like a 7-Eleven. I may be sweaty and grimy, but I feel like $1,000,000. I thank the guys and I head on out. Time to move on. Hold on a sec.
Oh, I almost missed it. I got done with my workout. I was walking down the street and Robert yelled at me from down the way, and I guess Manny himself is showing up for an early training session for his fight in Macau with Rios.
There's a small language barrier here, so I'm not sure if I heard right, but I head up the elevator and find a crew has gathered.
I doubt anybody in Makati knows this is happening. Everybody in the neighborhood knows it's going on because he's the hometown hero and he's coming back to acknowledge his people. And so all his boyhood friends and family members and friends of friends, they're all pouring in right now. The word is spreading, and it's exciting to feel that budding energy and to be part of it. Hanging out with the guys waiting for the entourage to roll through.
And sure enough, after a few more minutes, there he is. What an entourage. Caddy Escalade, Beamer motorcycle escorts, legit. Manny warms up slow, but starts building the intensity as he goes on. It's still almost 3 months till his upcoming fight, so these are just the first baby steps of training camp. Nonetheless, can this guy go? He flows from one workout to the next, never short of breath, never losing a step. Remember how I talked about footwork? Manny is considered a master of the art. The whole time this guy trains, from beginning to end, he's bouncing like he's on springs.
Manny, you need a partner? I'm fast. I trained with your boy Verone. I trained with your Robert Verone. He's a good trainer. Taught me some tricks. I'm coming up. Yeah, I'd probably do better in the UFC than boxing. Too slow, I need to grab and take somebody down.
What a trip! In a way, my Sonder through Sampalak is a mini rags to riches story in itself. Starting off lost in a rather unscenic set of streets, then stumbling upon some World War II history, then meeting this ebullient group of kids that lead me to the gym, next step training with some hardcore, real deal boxers, and then finally, what? Meeting Manny Pacquiao himself? This just goes to show you, you never know what can happen when you step out on the streets and ingratiate yourself with the locals. One thing is for sure, if I stayed in the hotel and watched HBO, or even if I stayed in Makati and hung out with the expats, I wouldn't have had this experience. Now, I know what you're thinking. Johnny, your last name may be Leg, but there ain't no way Jose you've been walking this whole time. And you're right, you got me. I cheated a bit. Remember that thing you saw me jump in a while ago? Well, that's a very special thing. A unique form of transportation called a jeepney.
The story begins at the close of World War II when soldiers dumped their military jeeps as they left the Pacific Theater. They were rugged and plentiful, so the locals figured, why not put them to use? First, they stretched them out just a little bit to accommodate more passengers. And then they said, hell with it. Let's stretch it out a lot. And finally, they got pimped.
Even the Pope got a ride in a sarao. Gangsta.
In the Philippines, it's basic transportation, but if I had one of these in LA cruising down Venice Beach, I'd be the king of the city. Jump on in, guys. Take a seat. Back's open.
Back in the 1950s, a guy named Leonardo Sarao started this little garage, which blew up into the primo jeepney factory in the country. Their vehicles dominated the roadways of Manila. It's a real treat getting to walk around the factory. Old engine blocks splayed out on the floor, workers wielding metal, old jalopies gathering dust while new ones roll off assembly lines. But although they might be flashy and flossin', the jeepney is all about utility. Like Los Angeles, Manila is a sprawling metropolis with a poor public transportation infrastructure. It also has busted up roads that snake every which way and flood a lot. In fact, when I arrived, it was flooding like crazy. When the typhoons hit, they put a beating on the streets. Here's where the jeepney fills in. They're tough, durable, big enough to fit a decent passenger load, but small enough to get through some narrow lanes, and cheap enough that your average Filipino can afford the ride.
What I like about the jeepney is it's a social experience. It's affordable and it's social, as opposed to a taxi where you're sort of isolated from the world outside of you. You take your fare and you pass it down the line, and the change comes back to you.
On the road less traveled, we've been pounding the pavement through the capital city of the Philippines, Manila. I've had some Shantaram-like community love in the slums of Tondo, gathered a few massage cards in Makati, and in Sampaloc, met a boxing legend. Jumping between the neighborhoods has been easy breezy lemon squeezy by using the unique local transport called the jeepney. Back on my own 2 feet, I have one more neighborhood to explore. Another totally different change of pace. Centuries before the Spanish arrived, Chinese, under the rulership of the Sung dynasty, came down this river to trade with native Filipinos.
The Spanish government, within cannon shot behind large fortress walls, later granted the land to Chinese Roman Catholics, making it officially the world's first Chinatown.
I figured to continue my walk and uncover any of its charms.
I'm particularly on the hunt for some good food. All this walking generates an appreciable appetite, and I think I got hungry in the right spot.
You get the feeling there are 100 little spots tucked around these alleys. I wish I had more time to explore, but when I get hungry, my mind gets tunnel vision. First stop, Zhangzhou Ramen for some hand-pulled noodle soup. Look at these guys prep. That's old school. A little finger pointing and pantomiming, and my order is done. Now, they're a little skimpy on the beef, but they load the bowl down with noodles. Yum.
Woo! That was fantastic, but I saved a little room because I hear there's a great dumpling spot down the road, and I am a fool for an amazing batch of steamed dumplings. Let's see if I can find it.
Down a tiny alley, I find the unassuming restaurant. Workers mixed in with customers. One group making the dumplings fresh, the other gobbling them up.
This should be good. I don't want to say local food here in the Philippines is
mediocre, but Chinatown is like a culinary oasis in a dry land. It's an absolute hole in the wall, but man, oh man, these dumplings are good and cheap. Now I'm stuffed. Moving on, back in Intramuros, there's a little spot that serves bland food while top-notch dancers rip up the floor with styles straight from the Philippines. There's a decent crowd mesmerized by the whirling performers. I hustled back here not for the grub, but for a very special kind of music and dance. I'll admit it, it's a little bit touristy, but
This is the real reason I came to this restaurant. It's a uniquely Filipino dance called tinikling. Many say it comes from the mating ritual of a local bird, but others say the origin derives from Spanish colonization.
my plan is to hang low till the very end of the performance, wait for everything to shut down, and then see if I can cajole the dancers into letting me have a go. Sure enough, as the crowd rolls out, I make my move. And success. I even have a cool dancing shirt to wear.
The Folklorical Filipino Dance Company. I need more energy. I got all dressed up for you guys.
There is a theory that the Spanish would punish lazy field workers with 2 clapping bamboo poles. This is a possible origin of how such a threatening mechanism worked its way into leaping feet and a dance of risk and defiance. It makes sense. The sound of wood clapping shut below me definitely motivates quick feet. I'm not feeling lazy at this moment. It's hard not to smile when you're dancing tinikling. It's also hard to daydream or zone out. This is one performance that requires some focus. The key to the dance is rhythm, which clearly I have in abundance. If you don't want your legs crushed, you've got to listen to the beat of the poles. Boom, boom, clack. Boom, boom, clack. When you hear that clack, your inside foot better be up in the air. If you get caught, you may be going to the hospital. And my walking tour days would definitely be on hold.
Some of you have broken your foot? Wow. I bet you're really quick after that. Your foot's like,
I bumble and stumble, but I keep my little feetsies and my little toesies intact. I may not be crane-like graceful, but I figure dancing is all about enjoying yourself and just letting your personal energy and style out. Who cares if you do it right or you do it wrong? Just do it for you. But if you care to see how the pros do it, this is the difference. Yeah, they're fast. But did you see my panache? They tell me it would take 4 years of training to get to that level. I'm not sure I want to tinikling that bad, but I'm impressed with the dancer's dedication. Any dedicated artist impresses me. And there it was. That was fun. Manila is a huge metropolis with gnarly traffic and hustle that just doesn't stop. Plus, it's hot. At a certain point, it's time to get out. I jump a bus and head for the cooler highlands. Bus gave way to tricycle, and tricycle gives way to feet. The deeper I push, the more primitive the trail. Steep, uneven, and relentless. I drop into a land much different than Manila. In fact, it's much different than anything I've ever seen before.
Once upon a time, 2 brothers chased a wild boar into the realm of the gods, Kabunyan. As they slayed the beast, its cries caught the attention of the sky deity, Lidam. He wasn't happy with the trespass. So the brothers split the kill and presented half of it to him as a peace offering. They noticed that the god ate his food raw, So one brother pulled out a piece of flint, made a fire, and cooked his share, offering some to Leadum. Leadum so enjoyed the taste of it that he had to have some of this thing called fire. So he traded with the brothers. He gave them a special kind of rice that came with a special set of rituals. This is the land of that rice and the land of those rituals.
The rice terraces of the Philippine Cordilleras have been around for a long time, thousands of years. They were built by hand. The primeval jungles above them feed water through stacked paddies, so scenic you'd swear there was a master gardener or architect at work. But for the native people, the Ifugao, the purpose was purely utilitarian. Their ancestors, likely from Indonesia, planted rice on the sloping hills of these mountains. When they realized rice plants grew bigger and healthier in areas where water pooled, they carved out more pools, and soon the terraces began to take shape. No local fully grasped the scope, the stunning beauty they'd created, generation by generation, until the first travelers arrived, avidly snapping pictures on strange devices everyone now knows as cameras. The Ifugao were creating a sustainable food supply and had unwittingly designed a masterpiece. I've come here not just to take a few photos and observe, but to entrench myself a bit in the life of this environment. To step into the mud that's been worked for over 2,000 years, sustaining a unique region and people. Ultimately, I want to get into the terraces. Before we get there, I must find a certain kind of man somewhere in an Ifugao village.
In the West, we idealize personal space and individual adornment, having that secluded house on the hill that outshines our distant neighbors. Here, they abhor that concept as antisocial, something that rips at the threads of community. And you can see it in the design. There's no walls, no fences, everything's close together. Everyone washes their dishes over here. Everyone takes a shower down there. Neighbors walk to and fro. Oh, and every house has a skeleton in the closet, or rather, the attic.
Their relationship with the dead and with the ethereal here is perhaps more intimate than the Western mind might feel comfortable with. Wrapped in those blankets are the bones of ancestors, dug up, sanctified in ritual, and placed so the spirits of the forefathers continue to have a presence in this home. Occasionally, bodies are mummified whole, one generation embracing the next in a cadaverous cuddle under the sleep of hundreds of years. This is the tradition of the Ifugao, a spiritual people whose world is shared with the gods and with their dead. I find the environment both welcoming and discomforting, a gentle rebuke of my own Western upbringing, where my ancestors are buried in distant fields and forgotten, and my neighbors are ostracized behind property lines.
Check this out. Typical Ifugao house, but obviously one from a wealthy resident. Not only because it's adorned with the skulls of animals that have been sacrificed, but specifically water buffalo skulls, which is an expensive animal to kill. Inside, no chimney, smoke would just billow around, the smoke that they made for cooking fires, giving this wood the dark color, also preserving the wood. The residents slept here, in the back, the cooking, atop a granary. This area down below you would think would just be a natural place where you would chill on a hot summer day, but no, it was preserved only for special occasions, wedding perhaps, or a funeral.
It probably goes without saying that sacrifice is an integral part of the Ifugao culture. Almost all big events are accompanied with death. The gods both bless and consult through blood. Deeper in the village, this tradition continues as I find the person I've been seeking.
This poor chicken is in its last moments of its life.
It's about to be sacrificed to determine whether this is an auspicious time to plant the rice. Basically, they're looking for the level of bile inside the chicken, and if the level is at a proper point, they'll say, okay, it's time to plant now, otherwise they'll... Woo. The Mombaki recites his archaic incantation. I feel a link to the past in this moment. A time when the several tribes of these mountains fought each other, axe to spear. A time when a poor crop meant heaven was angry, and a good one signaled the approval of the mystical figures in the sky, the woods, and the homes. It's tough to watch, but also I can't tear my eyes away. It's fascinating. The whole affair is grisly, but it's also ancient and revered. He literally ripped the chicken open with his hands, and now he's examining the bile duct. The reading was positive. The first chicken's gallbladder suggested that it's an auspicious time to work. The second one had a very specific reading. The way it was folded over gave the indication that the gods would be looking after the workers and protecting them as they did their labor in the field, on their way to work, on their way back from work. And I asked through a translator what would happen if the reading was negative. If there's a presentiment of a bad harvest, of bad fortune, more animals have to die. They're going to increase the sacrifice in order to appease the gods before they assume work in the fields. You could have a worse final moment of your life. With strong images of sacrifice burned in my mind, I leave the ritual. It's time to work. Although I've spent a good deal of time in the outdoors pursuing recreation, I've never truly got a taste of country life. These small villages that accompany the terraces, often deep in the forest, are as rural as it gets. A tiny cluster of simple homes where every activity ultimately revolves around the rice crop. How could I claim to know them without getting my hands a little dirty and walking in their shoes? I climb up from the village to a lonely terrace being silently worked. Something I've always wanted to do in my short life. Plant a little rice. Get a closer attachment to this food I've eaten so much of. Woo! Yeah! It feels nice. Slick. All right, take
by twos.
by twos. Like that?
Yes, you hold it in the.
Hold it very low.
Yes,
And how far do I push it in? Just like that?
yes. Push it down.
Okay.
Push it.
I can definitely see, you can see in the posture of people who've been doing this all their life, a definite change in their stature, and I can see it just standing like this for a little bit, puts a little strain on the back. You've seen the enormity of these terraces. The whole thing is planted just like this. Every piece driven down by a press and a twist of someone's hand. And I thought washing the dishes was a chore. You can see there are no machines, nobody spraying pesticide. Every strand of rice looks different, nothing genetically modified. This is as wholesome and as earthly as you can get when it comes to your food. To pass away the time. I can sing too, but you might not like it. Some people may say I forgot to plant rice in this patch, that I wasn't very cognizant of what I was doing. It's my style, Johnny style rice. But what I say is I created a little footpath. It's all how you frame things. Eventually the sun and the strain get the best of me, and I tap out. Oh! You hear that, ladies? I think that's the 5 o'clock whistle, the Fred Flintstone whistle. Ah! My back is killing me. I'm like a little hobbit. No ring though. Still looking for it. Planting the rice, you're really zoned out. Your mind
clears. On the flip side, you're really hunched over. The sun's beating down on you. So would I want to do it for 8 hours? Not really. Not unless it was really rewarding work, which it is not. Most of these people are just planting for personal consumption. Imagine all that work, all the planting, all the processing, repairing the walls, pounding the rice, cooking the rice, and then bloop, 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 finished. Got to start all over again, planting the rice, repairing the walls, boop, 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 done. So it ain't easy, but I'm glad I got to share a little piece of their life with them.
The solace, of course, is the link from the past, the knowledge that you're carrying a torch passed over 100 generations. But for the newest generation, this solace is not enough. The lure of cash jobs in Manila and other cities has a strong pull. The terraces are no longer in isolation, and now that the sweet honey of opportunity has been tasted, it's hard to resist its draw. For the time being, the terraces are still as they were, still being worked to feed the descendants of the first men. But in 20 years, will they be the same, or will they simply be maintained in part, just enough to satisfy a growing tourism industry? The future is uncertain. For me, the future is clear. I'm gonna lay down on this bench and pass out. We might not have siesta in America, but I'm a big fan, as you can see. But I've only seen one side of the coin, and just like you can't have yin without the yang, I can't leave the terraces until I find the flip side of the cycle, the harvest. Although fun to try for a moment, I can imagine, just like the planting, this work can become both strenuous and mind-numbing as the hours rack up. But when confronted with tedium, humans always come up with some inventive ways to entertain themselves. The Ifugao, working these terraces, have patched together, I imagine over several generations, a unique oral tradition. Remember this song?
This woman is carrying on an oral tradition, which is very fascinating. All the indigenous tribes here have several types of oral traditions. This one's called a hut-hut, which is a sing-song tale that you tell to pass the time as you're picking the rice, but it's not without content. She's singing right now about her people's origin, the Tuwali people, about how they descended from an eagle-like sky god. What's fascinating is this tale, if told from beginning to end, would last days without repeating itself. Unfortunately, the modern generation of kids could barely recite a paragraph. She in her 80s could probably go an hour without repeating herself. The days of being able to go on continuously, sun up to sundown, without stopping, are over. That oral tradition is dying.
The ladies are again super welcoming. And again, I'm the weakest link in the chain. But there's something calming about this simple act of harvest. An ancient human activity I've never engaged in before. Working with the one food which has sustained humanity more than any other. Rice, which may have been in our diets for over 7,000 years, is the staple for more than half of the world's population. Less than 10% of all rice is exported. It's the food of the community, just like these grains I'm picking, which will almost all end up on the plates of the villages below. Out of the paddies again, and I think it's time to enjoy my handiwork.
Now here is something that the shishiest person in Sausalito and the most hardcore hipster in Silver Lake would both appreciate. Rice from a 3,000-year-old terrace that's non-GMO, totally organic, and reputedly straight from the gods. That's some good rice. Some good rice.
The rain begins to drop, and the last jeepney is about to leave the village.
Well, we explored some of the little-known wonders in unappreciated Manila. We checked out these amazing rice terraces in Banaway. We got a little taste of some original spiritualism here in the Philippines, but it runs much deeper than that. But before I go further into the mysticism, I need to go see a guy in Manila who survived 3 fires, 2 earthquakes, and a lead bomb. Sound interesting to you? Go grab your rucksack. I'll meet you in Manila on the next episode of The Road Less Traveled.